I call Claire Baker to be followed by Ros McCall. Ms Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wish to make a contribution to this debate, and as I have in previous debates around these topics, I will focus on what we know to be the case, what the legal position is, and what the implications are for the safety of women and girls. I won't deny that this debate is difficult. For those of us who recognise the rights of everyone to be accepted for who they are, and that everyone has the protection of the law to be protected from harassment and stigmatisation, there are sensitivities and tensions where people's rights have to be balanced. This is often the case in understanding the application of rights, and the law is there to guide us. I'll start with what I think is the issue of broader agreement. We should have single-sex wards in hospitals, and there should be access to single-sex toilets and changing rooms in public facilities, including schools. There is the impression there has been a steady move away from this provision, and a figure of 1 in 20 schools only providing unisex toilets has been suggested. The intention behind introducing gender-neutral toilets may have been to reduce bullying, vandalism and increase equality and inclusion. However, there are isolated reports of voyeurism and sexist behaviour towards girls, and these are just incidences that are reported. If it's brief.
Lawrence Leader.
Such incidences have been due to the poor behaviour of boys, not of trans women, though, correct?
Claire Baker.
The next line in my speech is the evidence of reports of offensive behaviour is carried out by boys. And that is why I'm arguing that we need to have single-sex toilets and that girls should have a space where boys are not allowed and not shared toilets. All young people should feel safe at school and be entitled to privacy and dignity. And single-sex toilets and changing rooms are part of achieving that. And the government should provide clear direction to support that provision. Single-sex wards in hospitals is a policy where it is now hard to see what progress has been made. When the SNP were in opposition, they criticised the Scottish Executive for lack of progress on single-sex wards. And yet now it is difficult to determine the extent of the use of mixed-sex wards. It appears that Dumfries and Galloway are the only board to have solely single-sex wards. Our amendment highlights research from the Women's Research Network about safety in hospitals. Through FOIs, they identified the number of rapes and sexual assaults taking place in hospitals. The figures are shocking. Around 250 sexual assaults and 15 rapes have taken place in Scottish hospitals over the last 5 years. 163 of these rapes and sexual assaults happened on hospital wards, though we don't know if these are single-sex or mixed-sex wards. However, this data from Police Scotland only covers 57 of 198 hospitals in Scotland. That includes pandemic years when the hospital population was reduced and also heavily restricted. And these figures are likely to reflect underreporting, as we know these offences are often underreported across society. These figures highlighting as much of what we don't know as much as what we do, and they shine a light on these horrendous crimes. A patient in hospital is vulnerable, frail, dependent on others for meeting their needs. At times they will be unconscious or disorientated. They are often in a state of undress. A recent report from the Royal College of Nursing describes a collapse in care standards across Scottish hospitals, with increasing reports of corridor care leaving people in very vulnerable and undignified settings. All these conditions could lead to opportunistic assaults. The limited information available means that we can't identify if assaults were carried out by other patients or staff, or if they are carried out on patients or staff, though the high number on a hospital ward suggests that patients are often the victims. The research has also found that assaults were not routinely recorded or reported. Sometimes it appears that they are underplayed or minimised, as if the setting excuses some behaviours. Offences are not recorded as taking place in a hospital setting. There is no recorded data for 133 hospitals. There is no interrogation of these figures. There is little understanding of why Stop Hill, the Royal Infirmary and the private hospital Cygnet Wallace have the highest rates. There is little evidence of the figures being taken seriously as a collective issue by the NHS or by the government, or little reflection on why this is happening in hospitals and what steps must be taken to prevent further rapes and assaults. This leads to an inadequacy of safeguarding policies and guidance for NHS boards, and a clear responsibility to record all instances and for reports to be made to the police. The report from the Women's Rights Network makes a number of recommendations, and I urge the Scottish Government to take these forward. In the examples of single-sex wards, toilets and changing rooms, I would argue that discrimination on the basis of sex applies, and that in most cases the single-sex exemption in the Equality Act 2010 would apply. This states that where there is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, exclusions would include not only the opposite sex, but also people who hold a gender recognition certificate. But while the Equality Act underpins the guidance from the EHRC, there can be reluctance to apply it. This may be a result of the debate that preceded the Scottish Government's GRR bill or the debate that raged alongside it, which led to policy decisions preceding the legislation and the mainstreaming of gender self-identifying policies, which at times are counter to the Equality Act. It may be because public authorities are not confident that exclusion meets the threshold of the Equality Act. It may be because they don't believe it merits exclusion and they have assessed any risk to be low.
The member will be
and that
concluding.
it promotes. I'm sorry, I think I'm short of time. And that it sorry, I'll start again. It could be it's not been applied because they don't believe it merits exclusion and that they have assessed any risk to be low and that it actually improves inclusion. It is important that guidance is clear, that guidance exists, that public authorities know they will be supported when they make decisions, and that they're able to explain and justify the decisions they make, and that everyone in society is treated with respect, has their rights protected, and that they have safe and dignified spaces across public services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Baker.